Caesar de Bello Gallico, Book 4, Chapter 28. Ablative absolute clause, with peace having been firmed up or confirmed by these things. 18 ships, Solawarant, loosed out of the upper port with a gentle wind. All right, so what's the upper port? That's the port back on the continent. So we had 18 ships about whom it was shown above, which had carried the cavalry, loosed out of the port back in Gaul with a nice wind. After the fourth day, which it was a coming into Britain. So after 4 days, Caesar could have used those cavalry. Finally, they set sail from Gaul. When those ships were approaching, this is why it's a cum clause, cum plus subjunctive. It's when they were approaching. Now, apropinquo could be seen as a compound verb taking the dative. It's really ad propinquo. Or it could also be seen as a special verb taking the dative. Either way. We're approaching Britain, and were being seen from camp, so they were in sight of camp. Suddenly, such a great wind, storm, cohorta est, arose, result clause, that no ship, why is this feminine? Because it's referring to ship. No ship of them, that's why it's feminine, because it's referring to ship, was able to what complement clause? To hold the straight course, but alia, some and others, some were carried back to the same place from which they had set out. Others, complement clause, were thrown to the lower or southern part of the island, which is nearer the setting of the sun. So that means the west, with great peril of the greatest peril of themselves. Those guys, however, with anchors having been cast out, it's like, okay, well, we won't be tossed off course. We'll throw our anchors. When they were being filled with waves, having been, that's the ships, having been borne forward by necessity into the deep in an unfavorable night, they sought again the continent. So therefore, some of the ships were tossed off course. Some were blown straight back to Gaul. Others, they tried to put out the anchors and hold steady near the camp of Caesar, but they were filled with waves, having been carried forth by necessity into the deep. They couldn't stop it. In an adverse night, they were thrown off course. They returned to the only place they knew how, back to the continent. Well, that's a problem. Why is it a problem? It's a problem because Caesar doesn't have any cavalry anymore. Without any cavalry, he's definitely not at the best advantageous position to deal with the Gauls and all of their cavalry and war chariots. That's going to be a difficulty for him. And we'll see what happens in Caesar's twisty turns of fate next time, true believers. And until then, Excelsior. Caesar de Bello Gallico, Book 4, Chapter 29. As if the storm at sea was not enough, the Romans are facing a storm here at Britain. And it happened, eadem nocte, ablative place phrase, time expression, no in needed, that the moon would be, probably a result clause, full, that the moon was full, which day that was accustomed to render Maritime tides, Eistus, greatest in the ocean. So, we're dealing with the relative adjective clause, and it, namely the problem that when a full moon you had bigger tides, was unknown to our guys. Thusly, the tide was filling at one time et and et, both the long ships of the ships of war, in which Caesar had taken care for the army to be transported, and which he had drawn up on dry land. So the long ships were on dry land for taking care of the ships, and the tempestas, the storm, was shattering the burden-bearing ships. Now, is the burden-bearing ships which had been fastened to anchors. So therefore, his long ships that had been carried over to transport the army, and both the burden-bearing ships for supplies and also carrying the army, which had been fastened at anchors, neither was there any, associative verb, dabatur, was given, neither was any power either of managing or of aiding was given to our men. So our men were totally clueless on what to do as the tides came up, and the ships out at anchor were being swept away and filled with water, and the ships that were on dry land were being wrecked. Cum, when the rest of the ships were being, equational phrase, useless ad navigandum, for navigating. Ablative, I see an ablative, there's your participle, ablative absolute clause, with ropes and anchors and the remaining armaments, riggings, having been lost. When that happened, a facta est, something feminine was made. What was made? A magna perturbatio, a great alarm, genitive possessive, of the whole army was made. That alarm, which was necessary. When he says necessary, it often means unavoidable, which was natural to happen. For neither were there other ships, equational phrase, by which they might be able, so therefore this is a relative clause of purpose, they'd be able to be carried back, and they were wanting everything which would be of use, another relative clause of purpose, for the refitting ships, so therefore a gerundive. And because it was standing true, it was evident to all, to be appropriate to winter in Gallia, in Gaul. And, because before they even got there, it was obvious to all that it was appropriate to winter in Gallia. As a result of that, the frumentum, the grain, the grain had been provided not in these locations, namely Britain, for the winter. So as we close this cliffhanger, we're dealing with a problem of Caesar's storm has now blocked his way home, and additionally, Caesar's storm has stopped his reinforcements, and as a result of this, his men are now in a worried situation. How will Caesar get out of it? We'll have to find out next time. Take care, true believers, and Excelsior.